Oh,
You may. You did.
Yeah, maybe broadcast.
The audience is asking.
okay.
Wow, thank you.
Everybody can hear now, I assume? Can you hear us?
Kristen, can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear us?
Carlson?
Chris,
Yep,
okay,
okay,
thank you.
Okay.
Kristen's just a picture.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
good. Thank you. All right.
Now they're all doing it.
Okay.
Now, we've been asked to kind of move things around a little bit. So we're going to, the last shall be first. Policy BGB, policy adoption timeline. Now, the superintendent and I had a nice chat last week as I was driving over back roads in Maine. And we kind of lost each other every now and again, but we put things back together again. Where? Policy adoption timeline.
You like my copy?
No, thank you. I'm assuming I have a copy here.
You do, it's right after your minutes, actually.
Oh. You see, we have an administrative assistant who clearly knows more about what I'm doing than I do. We talked about this one at the last meeting. And the 30 days on the table didn't work for us in some instances because we had a meeting closer than that. And I thought it made sense to just say the next meeting. So I presented that the last, and Sheila did some work on that. And this is what we have. And when we look at it, my understanding is it's about what it says. But as a committee, we should understand that it's no longer the 30 days we've been talking about, but it's the next meeting. Anybody have any comments or questions on that one?
Is there any reason why that wouldn't work? You know, because sometimes we have to have a meeting the next week or
Yes,
2 weeks.
and that's why I'm making sure we all understand it's not 30 days anymore, because the meeting may be
Right,
closer
right.
than the 30 days. And it makes no sense to say, well, then we have to go to a second meeting in order to officially adopt.
No, I agree with you. I just didn't know if there's any reason why it wouldn't work. Or you
No,
proceed.
I would think that the only situation is if at the next school committee meeting, committee members do not think it's been long enough to consider, I would imagine
Somebody could motion to
you
table.
could move to move it to the next meeting.
Yes,
Gotcha.
This is actually the policy that you currently have on the books, so
so in essence, this one pretty much does that.
I believe so.
Okay, do we have a motion to accept?
Move to accept.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion or comments or anything? Those in favor? Thank you. Against? Abstain? Okay. That one is done. Now, policy DD, grants, proposals, and special projects. We had a good long chat about this one, and I think we took it to where it needs to go. Apparently, the state or the federal government are both in their infinite wisdom. And don't ask me to define their infinite wisdom, as we're being recorded in public. The school committee has to accept the grant. There's times we don't meet for a month or two, or over the summer it could even be 3. So that this puts the administration and the district in kind of an arm lock. Because Sheila was telling me last summer they had something, you had 2 weeks. And the school committee wasn't meeting. So supplies couldn't be ordered. I understand they probably weren't available anyway, right
We're
off.
delayed.
But nevertheless, we can get around this. What I suggested was, let's have the superintendent and the chairman accept the grant to then be presented down at the next school committee meeting for school committee, full school committee acceptance. But the chairman will accept the grant on behalf of the full school committee. I think that makes good sense, Mr. Chairman. I assume you're okay with that.
If we're in the boundaries of, in that transition piece, and if that needed to happen, I would think if that's legal and we're in good stead to do that,
Yes.
then the full committee can then
Ratify what the chairman
Ratify,
has
yeah.
done in our stead.
Yeah, that would make sense.
I would think so. Any other comments or questions? Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to accept.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor? All right, we don't need to go to the other two because it's already a done deal. Public gifts to the school. This is basically the same thing, isn't it, Sheila?
Yes, sir.
So again, I would say the superintendent and the chairman for the committee, and then to be presented to us to ratify or to support what the chairman and the superintendent have been done on the gifts.
Dr. Allen, I didn't add that clause to this particular policy. I didn't realize that was your recommendation on this one.
Well,
I think for gifts, it's less,
less
I
on the
think, I think,
timeline.
I don't know, I'd have to defer to Cheryl on this, but I think that for a gift is the time, like that, would it be helpful to have that clause in there about if it's necessary to expend that gift?
So I actually suggest that we do, only because we have a few benefactors, I would say, that may donate and say, this is for the basketball team and the season is starting up relatively soon. So it may be helpful that we do that as well. This particular benefactor I have in mind has donated cash in the past, but also supplies and materials for the basketball program. So to get it into play as soon as possible, it might be helpful.
This is when we hit a dead zone, or when I hit a dead zone. So
Okay,
what I recommend is that we add that clause about the superintendent and the chairman being able to accept the grant or the gift. And then the school committee, full school committee would ratify at the next meeting. As long as nobody has any objections. Okay,
I move to accept.
Second.
all right.
You're going to vote, Dr. Allen?
Yes. All those in favor? Okay, we don't need to do the other two. Told you, you're ahead of me tonight.
Sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I haven't even made any wisecracks about it.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Doesn't mean I won't in the future. Okay. I don't see JJE on this. Oh, fundraising, that's the one we just did. No, that isn't.
so
Fundraising,
DIB, you have DIB, which is
oh,
an old policy, and JJE is the updated policy
okay.
from MASC. This is,
Fundraising. This policy was modified maybe 30, 40 years ago on my recommendation. I had somebody banging on my front door at least once a week, month after month after month. Part of it was I lived downtown, I think. But it just was to the point of beyond reasonableness. So we limited it. And Sheila is telling me that we ought to relook at this. Why don't you give the committee the same brief you did me?
well, yeah, I will. So, thank you. So the policy that Dr. Allen is referring to with the limitations is the policy DIB that you have in your packet that is watermarked, former policy for reference only. This is not the policy that you currently have in your policy manual. We have generally been operating as if this policy was still in existence. But
Well done.
upon researching the policy, we realized that this policy at one point was replaced by an MASC policy, JJE. We think that happened based on the dates when, just before Dr. Marshall left, you were doing a lot of policy cleanup and adopting MASC policies. And so JJE was put into place. If you look at the copy of JJE that you see on the screen or that you have in front of you, if you read the sentence that has been stricken from this policy, you will see that your policy that you currently have on the books, which is what's in black there on the screen and on your copy, is that it says that you generally disapprove of fundraising, and that you especially discourage the sale of goods produced by companies for profit, such as magazines, candies, and similar items. This was the MAC recommended policy that you adopted. Now, what's in red is the updated MASC policy, which we believe is much more in line, not only with our practices, but what we're hoping you believe is the way we should handle fundraising. We have found that in limiting fundraising activities to only one per school or one per high school activity group, it at times can be problematic. One example of that is the upcoming Washington DC trip for 8th grade students. The cost of that trip is now in excess of $800 per student. Their one fundraiser, it's going to be challenging, especially this year, given that for 2 years now, we haven't had that field trip because of COVID. Families haven't really been necessarily able to save for that trip. They weren't sure if it was going to happen. So between now or between September and April, for families to be able to save that kind of money, it's going to be a real burden for them. So we feel as though in certain instances, just the allowance of one fundraiser really might limit the number of students who would have access to a field trip, such as the Washington DC trip. And we're worried about that. And we feel like there might be times when more than one fundraising activity is appropriate. Another example of that is our postgraduate program. Our postgrads spend a lot of time in the community learning how to go to, for example, an apple orchard, pick apples, and pay for the goods that they receive. Without some funding from fundraising to support some of those activities, they're really limited into the types of learning activities that they can engage in. So again, we're recommending that this policy allows us, sort of states that you want to make sure that you're not fundraising so that you're putting a burden on the community, but you're also giving us a little leeway to when it's necessary or when we deem it necessary to allow more than one fundraising activity for a group in certain instances.
Yeah, so while we wanted to limit it significantly, I have confidence in the superintendent, and if in her judgment, she thinks more than one is in order, I'm fine with that. Any comments or questions on that?
With the fundraising, do they go through you, or do they go through the principal first kind of thing?
this policy says that they would, principal would be sort of the first step, but
Okay.
then it would need to be submitted to me for approval.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Move to accept.
Second.
those in favor? All right. This is the most ridiculous meeting, we're just whipping along. Community use of school facilities, KF. Oh, we have a KFR. Where's the KFR?
It's on the back of KF, Dr. Allen.
On the back of who?
On the back of KF, but it doesn't look as if it has a letter right there.
I haven't had a letter on it yet.
Looks like it was cut off. This is the regulations that went to the policy, yes.
Oh, okay. The school committee position in days of yore was we wanted to have as much town activity and interface and interaction with the schools as possible. They pay a lot of money to keep these things going. They even might say that it's a significant part of their budget, mightn't they? So that, we think, is to be desired. On the other hand, it shouldn't be a burden on the school. So this is the latest attempt or effort by the school to try to strike that balance. So why don't you talk a little bit about this, if you would?
Well, I'm going to ask Cheryl, if you don't mind, to speak to this because she has really been working with this for many months now. We identified, mostly in the regulation component of this, we've identified that we wanted to be equitable, the way we utilize our building, the way we charge people for use of our building, if we charge someone for use of our facility. We wanted to make sure that that was being handled in an equitable manner. And in sort of working with Kevin Clark and Elaine Karen, who are manage our plant and facilities department, we identified some areas where we thought our regulations were a little bit gray, if you will, and we were concerned that maybe, we weren't treating each organization in an equitable manner, or there was a possibility at least that we weren't. So Cheryl did a lot of research into other districts' regulations and has drafted something that we presented to the Plant and Facilities Subcommittee last week for their review. And I'm going to ask Cheryl to kind of highlight the details that we think will accomplish what you just stated, Dr. Allen, accomplish community organizations having access to our buildings, but with the caveat that it's not costing the district something extra to have those community organizations in our buildings.
So this was a team exercise that we actually started before COVID, and we had met with the Plant and Facilities Subcommittee back then, saying that this is something that we'd like to take on, and then COVID hit and it got put by the wayside, and we weren't letting anyone in the building to use it at that point. So we picked it back up, and our team was myself, as Sheila said, Kevin, facilities manager, and Elaine Karen, his administrative assistant. We brought some drafts and some early resources to Sheila just to say, are we on the right track? So what we did was we took a look at the current policy on file, the current regulations on file. We did some research as to how we were actually implementing those in the field. And then we said, okay, what do we want to end up with as a product? So there are very little changes on our current policy that we recommend. And really it just says, the policy says that permission is from the superintendent. If you saw the events calendar for our school district, there are thousands of activities that happen on a yearly basis. So thinking that Sheila's going to be available for us to ask her before something gets booked is a little crazy. So we'd like to add the word or designee, and we'd like to change that designee actually from the principal to the plant and facilities office because we had it centralized at one point. We then decentralized it and let it go to the principals, and that's kind of like when we lost control. Not everything was getting on the calendar. Some organizations were being invoiced, some were not. So we thought if we put it back there and there's one person that maintains the calendar so that knows what's going on, how to read the calendar, it would work a little bit better. And applications are available. And that also said at the superintendent's office, we prefer to have it online. That's what we're going to try to do. So that's on the district website. I think you're all aware that we're revamping our website. We've seen a quick mock-up of what it might be, but it's going to be much easier to find. Like right now, if I ask anybody to find the school events calendar, I bet it would take everybody quite a while to find it. It takes me quite a while to find it. So it's going to be much more easily found with other links from different areas as well. So those are the only two changes on our current policy. The regulations, we kind of like said, yeah, we don't want these. We've incorporated many of them in the new ones. We wanted to expand the regulations, which ended up being an 8-page packet. So it's, is it in draft? So it starts, and I thought, and this, we actually stole this from a neighboring school district. I thought it was wonderful. It starts with a letter from the superintendent. So anybody that's looking to ask for space in our building, superintendent writes a nice little letter up front for them. And then we like dive right into what our regulations are, what our application process is, and also what the contract. We currently have a contract. We simplified it, took out all the legal mumbo jumbo that nobody knows what it really means and kind of stripped it down to be common sense wording. The most important part about under our philosophy, and this was Kevin Clark that brought this to the table. We all thought it was a great idea, that there needs to be one person that is going to be responsible for whatever the activity is. And that one person we'll call it the contact person, is going to have a little professional development in the security and safety of the school that they're in and the space that they're in. We think we can accomplish this by just a video and maybe some conversation with either Mr. Clark or Ms. Karen. And so we would, if you're going to use let's just take the gym at New Braintree, these are your X's, this is what you do, or who you call if the fire alarm goes off, if you see water running too long, all those types of things is like what you need to do. But you're also being held responsible to make sure that the building is safe and secure when you leave as well. We don't think that video would be much later, probably 15 minutes at most, followed up with just a conversation when they submit their application with the plant facilities team. We thought that was very good. The insurance regulations, again, we're not waiving from that these have to be legitimate organizations. And when I say that, I'll say a little more later, but you have to be able to provide a certificate of insurance because this district, this recommendation, however, is the district doesn't want to take on any added liability or risk because you're using our building. If you're using the gym for a basketball game and somebody goes up for a layup and gets caught in the net and falls down and breaks a hip, we don't want to be on the hook for that insurance bill. We want your organization to be the first insured. So that's nothing different than what we had before. What we did was we had designed 3 different groups, 3 different categories of groups that would want to use our building. And it's going to look a little strange to you when we flip the page, but I'll explain why. So group A, we define as recognized school or groups based in the Quabbin communities, but not necessarily established as a nonprofit. For example, Quabbin Youth Sports, that was one of the areas that we learned. Some youth sports were being invoiced for space usage and others were not. So that was not equitable. And also with Quabbin Youth Sports, the PTOs, school councils, our music association, our booster clubs, and even town official meetings were for our 5-member towns during Group A. In Group B are nonprofit groups or not-for-profit groups. And that's with proof of tax exempt status. So we don't want to say, yeah, I'm nonprofit, and then find out you're making money on the side. Examples of this are the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts types of things. Group C are for-profit entities. camps, events, businesses that aren't really sponsored by the school district. So 3 different groups. And the application would determine which group you would be in. On the next page, page 3, we determine what our rate schedule will be. The first one is to rent the space, to use the space. There's a fee associated with that. But you'll see the chart looks a little funny because both Group A and Group B don't pay a charge to use the space. I think that's the intent of the school committee.
Yes, it
Allow
is.
the groups to use free of charge. Group C, however, there is a per hour charge. Our old policy was half-day charges. What we ran into with that was, and a half-day was defined as 4 hours. Then we run into it, well, I'm only in the building for 45 minutes. Do I have to pay the half-day charge? So we went to an hourly rate. These hourly rates aren't crazy. If we broke down the rates that were in our policy currently to an hourly rate, the $15 was $12.50. We haven't looked at these rates. I don't remember the last time we looked at these rates, actually. So we didn't go crazy on them. We just bumped them up to the next highest at $10 an hour, $5 an hour, I believe. I think we tried to capture all the areas that people would like to use our space. If we didn't, we can make amendments as we go along the way. So I wrote a little note down the bottom here because it does look funny. Like 'cause when we first saw this and then they were like, why do they have them there if they're no one to pay? The group designations of A and B, although they are not required to pay a fee for use of space, will be used to determine priority use. So if you're in Group A, you're Quabbin Youth basketball, and you want to use the gym, and the Boy Scouts say, can we use your gym for Pinewood Derby? We say, I'm sorry, but Group A has it first on that day. Would you like another day? That's just what those different categories are for. Now, on top of renting the space, paying a fee for renting a space, we have a personnel fee. And this is written that each group will pay a fee for custodial time under certain conditions. And they're all equal for those conditions, okay? First, and I tried these 1 through, I don't know how many we have here, 1 through, am I taking? 1 through 8. I have moved these around in an order, I don't know how many times, to make sure they kind of like made sense as a new reader would read them. So most importantly, there will be no charge for custodial staff during the school year, during the school week, and up to 9 p.m. at night. So regardless if you're Group A, B, or C, if we have custodians on duty, you're not paying extra for them. They're already on duty. However, we'd like all of our organizations to be out of the building by 9:30, which will allow for our groups who work till 10 and 11 o'clock to do what they need to do to get ready for the next day. During school breaks, which are winter break, February, April, and summer, the custodial staff, their timeline may change. So that 9 o'clock p.m. time may change during those time periods. And we may say the building is closing at 7 o'clock. Number 3, after 9 p.m. on weekdays, I'll say 9 o'clock on weekdays only, on Saturdays, Sundays, or holidays, a custodian shall be required to be on premises of Quabbin Regional Middle High School. And we thought that because that is a very large building where you may be only using a classroom in the middle of the building. You would have no idea if there's a flood in another area, if there's a fire in another area, if something is going on, if there's a weather emergency, you don't know. So we feel we need to have a staff member on staff during those times.
What about the elementaries?
I'm going to get there because we have some unique situations with the elementary schools that are taken into consideration. That was number 3. Number 4, sticking with the middle high school, all users of the middle high school shall be required to pay a custodial staff fee and an overhead fee, we broke it into 2 units, beyond the 9 p.m. time on Monday through Friday. Did I change that? 9:30. Okay, so it's till 9 o'clock, right? Okay, so 9 o'clock, Monday through Friday, and any time on Saturday, Sunday, or holidays, and you'll get billed for that time. So if a staff member, we don't want you to go to the 10 o'clock when they go home, because then they're going to be paying, we're going to be paying overtime for them to clean that section, and we want you out of the building. But if they're not on duty, you need to pay that fee. We determined the fee to be a custodial staff rate of $52 an hour. That's an overtime, that is not the highest, but it is close to the highest overtime rate of one of our current staff members. So you're at least covering what we found in the past. And Elaine and Kevin did a lot of research of the billing that was happening. And what we found was, sure, we were billing the entity for custodial time, but billing them at a ridiculously low rate that didn't pay the cost of the building, the cost of the custodian. So that's why we have it at $52. And we're saying an overhead charge of $10 an hour. That's like for the lights, the heat, whatever. Now, switching to the elementary schools, an organization requesting school facility use at any of the elementary schools may choose to pay the custodial staff an overtime rate, or it may choose to have the contact person responsible for cleanup, closing, building safety, and security. So this came up because Peggy in the past has taken the responsibility to open the building for basketball games at the elementary school. And she said, we can't afford to pay the fee, I'll take that responsibility. So, and Peggy has done a wonderful job.
And I clean up.
It's also,
I'll bet.
it's also been entrusted for this to happen at Hardwick Elementary School. However, the team has gone in on some days in Hardwick and had to clean and pick up trash and other things. So we put at the end of that sentence, however, if the district administration deems that the space used is not clean to district standards, finds lights on, doors, windows not secured, the organization shall agree to pay a non-compliance fee of $100. So somebody had to do that.
Incentive.
Holds accountability.
And they shall not be allowed to reserve future use until that fee is paid. The use of any outdoor areas anywhere, including athletic fields, will not require payment for custodial staff if the user, the organization, does not require access to the building. So if Babe Ruth is playing a game out here and they're using we have portable facilities to be used right here, they don't need to pay the custodial fee, whether it's on, the afternoon, whether it's a Saturday or Sunday game, because they're not accessing our building, it's the field, so we're not going to charge anybody for a custodial fee on our fields.
But they still go on the schedule, right?
Oh, everything goes on the
Okay.
schedule, so we
Okay.
don't double book. Everything goes on the schedule.
There aren't porta potties at the elementary stuff.
No, but like for basketball, we're inside.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's talking about using the fields.
Like youth soccer, they usually have
They do.
the potties.
Yeah,
It's been a long time since my kids.
yeah, they don't go in the building.
I've seen porta potties in Hardwick.
Yeah, and I know they have
Recently.
in New Braintree as well, yeah.
Yeah, near the fields.
Hubbardston, they did, I remember when my kids played baseball and soccer. So I think they are at those, because those are community fields too.
Well, Hubbardston is.
Hubbardston is, yes. So they have it at New Braintree, they have it at Hardwick, they have it at Hubbardston. Ocam, I'm not so sure about.
Ocam, they play soccer at right field, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then,
Baseball.
There's one down there.
baseball, yeah.
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 And then
Barry.
Ruggles, I don't know whether they play Roach Field, I think,
Or High Plains,
or High Plains, yeah, I think they play at the.
so it's off-site.
Okay. Again, the non-compliance fee applies to our fields as well as inside the building. So if there's a Babe Ruth game and we've got to clean out the dugouts or clean up the field, we're going to assess them the $100 fee. And I can say that Mr. Clark holds the same high standards as Mrs. Barnes did, so she taught him well. Now, indoor events or outdoor events who wish to pay the custodial fee shall have a designated indoor bathroom access in an area convenient to them. So if they're using the high school gym, they use the nearest, we're not going to say you can only use the 2 floors up and down the end. We'll make sure that they have a designated bathroom to use.
We can't use the bathroom that's closest to the gym
Why?
because it's designated for some kind of student group and the rest of us can't get in there because it's locked.
So we have to find the next available closest.
Aren't there 2 sets on that floor?
Yeah, this is just
Yeah, further
another
down.
50, 60, 75
Yeah.
feet further
Oh,
down.
so there are two on that, in that hallway, yeah. Well, I'd have to say that that is an area convenient to the event space, don't you think?
So I'm in a hurry.
Believe me, I hear you. Okay, so that kind of outlines what we were thinking about fees, okay? If the committee wishes to not have any types of fees whatsoever, that's their prerogative. But I think that if we go that route, we need to take a good look at other types of things that we are not charging our towns for, that we do for them, because you can't kind of have it both ways. We would need to increase at least our custodial overtime budget if we're not charging for space and that outside agencies are using. But there are several things that we do that we should point out more, maybe I should point out more in the budget process, that, because we're basically subsidizing town resources and town events with.
Boy,
without paying
I go with athletic fees first. I think us covering the athletic fees is way more important than these fees here.
I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean cover the athletic fees?
Not charge the kids. I would
We-
rather
we
not
are.
charge the kids athletic fees than not charge these groups.
And currently, we're on hold for athletic fees at this time, but I thought that was voted as a yearly vote.
It was.
So we need to take the vote yearly, I think, or at least again, right?
Right.
That's what I think. So right now, there are no athletic fees.
That's my point. I would rather not have athletic fees and charge these groups than have athletic fees and not charge these groups.
I agree with you.
But I hear what you said. You mentioned that there are other activities that are being done that towns benefit in some way. I don't know what those are, but I would like to know what those are down the road.
We're actually getting a list together so that we will have that. For one example, the district has 3 towns that get their health insurance through the district plan. So this agreement was in place long before I came here. So the towns of, I think it's New Braintree, Oakham, and Hubbardston. Town employees who are eligible for health insurance are on the district's plan, and the town pays 100% of the premium. So they're paying for the premium, but we're taking on the costs of all the administration. So our HR manager enrolls people, unenrolls people, chases them down when they're no longer on the check for the payment, but they're still on the program, all of that type of stuff. That does take some time. So that's one area where we help the towns.
What other examples?
The town of Hubbardston, we pay for the dumpster that the Slade Building offices use. We pay for all the maintenance and testing and upkeep of the Hubbardston well, because there's one well that feeds the school and the town building. So we take care of all of that maintenance and all of that testing. We don't build a town. At one
And they don't go 1 year us, 1 year them, nothing like that. So yeah, as you put that list together, I think it would be
Yeah, we're-
nice to see
Mr.
what other
Clark and
shared
Ms. Karen are putting that together.
things that we do for the towns.
Maybe next time they come running in here saying they're gonna have to fire themselves because they don't have the money, we'll say, hey, we're helping you out already.
And these are things that we've done year after year
Yeah.
after year, but there's a certain point where when you don't get, when we have the select board or the finance, the committee that run us over the coals, and when we go in to meet with them, and then we're paying, I mean, testing your water, as much as we have to test
Expensive.
water these days, is very expensive.
Expensive.
And those fees have gone through the roof over the last few years. So every time we replace the well cover at the school, we're the tenant of the building. We're not the owner of the building. But we're doing all the tests, all the water testing and everything for the schools.
There's a great story. The town of Barry get mad at the schools. And we were renting the Henry Woods building maybe for $12,000 a year or something like that. So they, in their venting their ire, they raised it to, I don't know, 40,000, 60,000, something like that. Howard, no, who was the guy, the guy without the fingers, that was the head of the DPW?
Earl Sample.
Earl Sample, yeah, I think it was Earl. Came running in the next morning to talk to Maureen, we raised you. And by the time he got up the stairs, she had all of the filing cabinets out in the hallway and some of the tables. And he said, what are you doing? We're moving out. What do you mean you're moving out? You raised our rent. So we're moving out. He changed his tune very quickly. And they compromised it, maybe a couple of $1,000 raise in the rent. But that was the most extreme example I have seen of a town trying to pull a fast one on the school and having the school respond in an extremely effective way.
Well, they did it after that as well, when they had to put in the elevator. And that elevator charge that's how this building got built, because I was hired just after this building was being built. Because they put in the elevator and the cost was outrageous, and Maureen said we can build a building for less than that over time. And then when the elevator was built, you couldn't get a wheelchair in the doors. So they've done it twice. Okay, we can move on to if you want to use our kitchens. And this is very similar to our current policy. No access to kitchen or the use of kitchen equipment is available unless a school nutrition team member has offered to work the event. Because we need to have somebody ServSafe certified if it's coming out of one of our kitchens. That employee shall have full authority over the use of kitchen access and may restrict access to certain equipment. And the current school nutrition staff rate is $25 an hour. Again, we looked at a median, because there's only a few people that offer to work these events. So we looked at a rate kind of medium for those people at time and a half. Ancillary charges, we aren't sure that this will come into play, but in case it's here. If you request to have technology staff because you need some assistance with putting a presentation together or whatever, you want field lighting or other costly services that we haven't defined here, it may, there's that word may, result in additional charges. Other personal related services not provided by the district, but you may need to have them. If you want or need police officers at your event, concessions or outside bathrooms, because ours are not available, it's up to you to take care of what you need to have done. We talk a little bit about scheduling. These actually come out of the current policy, so it has the same exact hierarchy of who gets to use what space when. Our current policy, however, says we want 48 hours notice for you to use space in our building. The current team said, we don't really need that much time. I mean, we will, if you have a last minute request, we will consider it if there's space. We'll let you know if there's no space, there's no space. What we do want, however, is a cancellation notice of at least 24 hours. Because like Mr. Clark said, if someone wanted to use the gym and have, like the town meeting that Barry had in our school, and so the custodians are going to start arranging those chairs much earlier than 24 hours. And then if you cancel, we got to take them all back down again. So that's what we really want to make sure we put something in our cancellation policy, because it takes time to set certain things up. The regulations governing the use of facilities, a lot of them came right from here. These basically reference the old regulations, a lot of the laws in the state. So we put all of those back in there. And actually, I'm not sure, other than we expanded where food and drink are allowed. We said not in the auditorium, but we don't want them in our gymnasiums either. Those floors are very costly. We added that if you have a major function that requires setup and dismantling, make sure that you leave yourself enough time on each side of that, because we're not going to help you. If the school is closed due to a snow day or other emergency, all events and activities will be canceled, and it's the organization's responsibility to reschedule. You can't use any of our stuff in the room, smart boards, computers. To get that nonprofit or not-for-profit status, you have to provide us with documentation from the IRS. There's the 24 hours for notice. We're not responsible for any personal property that is here. So if your son leaves a sweatshirt here at the baseball field, we're not going to pay for it. We had that on the bus this year. And the superintendent, we just expanded this a little bit, the superintendent, plant and facilities manager, or the principal reserves the right to refuse the use of the facilities to any particular group who has violated certain conditions. So we think we encapsulate everything that was on the regulations there into the new regulation. We've devised a form, which is their application/contract. We want to know what the organization is that's renting the space, but who is that contact person? Who's responsible? Tell us what space you're looking for, any date or alternate dates or alternate places that you'd like to be, what area of the school that you would like to use. And then other things are just a checkbox to make sure we have a valid certificate of insurance. We'd like to know if your activity is going to be open to the public. We might want to have some more security on hand. If you'll be charging an administrative fee, that might tip you over to the type C group. And will you have concessions served? We reserve the right that you need to tell us if you're going to have concessions so that we can make sure that they're okay. You know, we know what's going on. We know there might be extra cleanup there or something like that. And then we just make sure that after you sign, when you sign this, that means you've read everything here, you know everything that's going on. And then we created for ourselves, more importantly, after they sign whoever's responsible here for the application, we also put a grid together, like who are other contact people? For example, Peggy might say, I've got the youth basketball game on Tuesday, but I can't do it, so Dave's gonna do it on Thursday. Let's put anybody who might be the contact person here so that we make sure if we need to contact you, if we have to cancel you all of a sudden, we need to know who to be able to contact other than the person filling out the application.
And it's okay to transfer the numbers? You know, like if I have, say, George's number, I can say, listen, this is George's number. If you see something when you're here.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's what that's made for, to give. So not only a cell number, but an email address and the potential date thing.
Okay.
And then we created for ourselves, we would decide which group we believe you are, a group A, group B, or group C, which will tell us whether or not you're paying for use of space or the custodial fee. And then a little box here just to calculate out what the charges are. And then someone is responsible in the facilities office to issue an invoice. We have an invoice form that we use, and the date of the invoice went out and just that person's name who sent it out, and then send a copy of that invoice to us. So when we get a check in the mail, we know what it's for. So, of course, these forms are kind of like a work in progress. So if we need to make slight adjustments to them, not by any means changing the regulations or anything, but we need to make some minor adjustments to make sure it works for us, we'll have to do that. We hope Mrs. Bennett has offered to make this a fill-in form. So what I imagine is that all of the regulations will be one document in the area of the website that this will be, and then the application will be a fill-in form that someone can just do it right there on the computer. And then that would go right to the plant facilities team and get on the calendar. That's our hope anyway.
It's a lot of work here, Cheryl.
Well, like I said, it was a team effort. We roped Sheila, what do you think about this, a few times as we went along, but.
Very thorough.
I think this is the best we could do.
I'd like to throw a question open. We know that there's no smoking on school grounds.
Mhm.
Do these organizations know,
It's in there.
and no alcohol?
Yep, it's in there. We tried to get all of those, because these were in part of, on here. So we
Signs somewhere
incorporated.
on the property.
If they aren't, we recently talked about the no
I thought we'd
smoking.
seen them at one time.
Yes. Actually, we're re-looking at all of our signage.
Yeah.
Both inside and outside of the buildings. We had talked early on when Sheila and I went to, I think it was North Brookfield for an event. And when you walk in the front door, you knew exactly where the ladies' room was. Thank goodness. But when you walk in our buildings, you have no idea. So you'll notice when you walk to the high school, at least, there's a lot of new signage above the halls. So you know where you are and where you need to go. And we did the same thing outside. I came here on a weekend to work, and when I pulled my car out, something caught me in the corner of my eye, and it was a new sign over here. So I drove over here. I think that's the one that says no smoking on
Yes,
the
it
grounds.
does.
And so it was brand new, and it caught my attention. Kevin noticed that a lot of signage that we have outside our buildings is worn so much you can't really read it really well. So you'll notice those things going up. As soon as he's getting them, he's putting them into place. But yeah, Dr. Allen, it does say that in here. It says no smoking. It's under,
And no alcohol.
number 1, no smoking or alcohol. We can't discriminate. Prohibit firearms and dangerous weapons, no hazing of students, no food and drink. Don't use an area where you weren't asking to use an area. Set up and dismantle.
The food and drink, if somebody
Damages.
brings a sandwich and a bottle of water?
To what? Not in the gym.
No, to an event.
To an event, yeah, as long as they clean up after themselves. Yeah, but not, just no food or drink in the auditorium or the gymnasium, just because the floors are very. And, yep, everything else I talked about. We made sure that anything that was really important in our regulations got back in here. Yep.
The thing that went through my mind when Sheila said, we have some gray areas. Cheryl's going to take care of them. I think Cheryl doesn't do gray.
I don't do gray.
I told you don't do gray.
Black or white.
Yes, that was very well done, very well done. Committee members have any comments or questions?
No, it's just good to see it back in plants and facilities hand, because I can see where things were going on in places and buildings that you probably had no idea that was happening, or, you know,
It happened again this summer, yeah. And something was going on, we didn't know about
so
it.
that's a good thing.
Sometimes things just, you
Not out of malice or anything,
No,
but
but you get-
just, yeah.
Yeah, principals have so much on their plate.
Yeah.
Really. Someone could call and say, hey, can I use your gym? And they say, absolutely, yes, and they want to put it on the calendar, but secretary's already left and they got an admin meeting to get up here too, and it just doesn't get on the calendar.
Right.
Meanwhile, the facilities go, oh yeah, that space is open, and they book it for someone else. So they've decided to stay with their current, the module that we use for facilities usage.
Oh, that's
They
good.
were looking at different types of things, but they just felt that, one, the calendar was really good. Of course, we've been told that a Google Calendar will do the same thing. Whoever designed that thing? No, so we decided no, and we also, it was best for the maintenance logs that we have to keep. So we decided to stay with that system, which
Well-
they've all, know how to use very well. So,
Yeah, I like the school administrators focusing on academic.
right.
And this is much closer to the people who are responsible for that sort of, it's in the right hands. You're right, Peg.
When I was teaching in Hardwick, one of the things that I remember is whether it was Catherine Brandon or Dick Bray, that frustration with, I don't want to deal with this. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't on the top of my list today. Now I've got to stop and sort this mess out. And you're just what Dr. Allen said, it takes away from their primary focus in terms of education for the kids. So but it was very frustrating for administrators to get suddenly hit with that, or you told me I could use it, and then it starts a whole, there's 2 hours of a conversation.
And so much of the use of our buildings is after school hours. So it makes sense if they contact the plant facilities manager, they get in touch with the custodian on site instead of, calling the principal who may already be in bed because they got,
Change.
So, yeah, so it makes
Yeah.
more sense to us that that's where it belongs as well.
And I would say that our custodians in this district can handle this all right. I can imagine, I've seen districts where I would not feel comfortable with them in charge of something this responsible. But again, I think that's kind of what we have in this district.
I agree.
I like that you're getting it back into the plant and facilities and having a master calendar and to be able to know that. My question is in regards for what's best for the district as well, especially for any liabilities, especially for supervision. If something ever happened, I know you have a clause in here for any liabilities, things like that, but who is the administrator in charge? Who is the person in the building? If something ever happened, what do we, I don't need the superintendent to have a problem. We have something that happens in the building, hands go up and go, I don't know, that type of thing. My question is from a liability perspective, where is the supervision and a site admin or whatever it might be? So the district is, I see that's held harmless in some of the language that you have. But God forbid if something ever happened, are we dubbing people, administrators in charge of their space and something happens? And then you have multiple people in buildings? I'm just curious.
You mean on our side or on the user's side?
Really both, because you have, when the principal leaves 4, 5, or 6, whatever time they leave, the principal is not in charge of that organization with supervision.
Sorry, I guess maybe I didn't make that clear though. No, so Mr. Clark is in charge.
Mr. Clark is in
Right, so
charge.
if there's an emergency, if you are renting a space and there's an emergency, it's Mr. Clark you call.
Okay,
He takes that responsibility because he has staff on site.
Yeah, 'cause
We
he
have staff on
designated-
site until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock every night, except for holidays, weekends, whatever.
but we're not dubbing a custodian.
No. Mr.
Administrator.
Clark- No,
Sorry.
Mr. Clark is the administrator on the district's behalf. The coverage is why we ask for the $1 million, $3 million in liability.
Right.
And that's why we had a person reached out to Mr. Clark just last week, I think it was the week before, I guess. Hey, I've got a bunch of guys and I'd like to play basketball in one of your buildings. We said, I'm sorry, unless you're a formal organization that has insurance coverage, we don't allow that in our buildings. For the purpose that I said about you went up for the layup and you get caught.
Right.
Right. Somebody falls down and breaks a hip. They did it on our property. Well, we're the tenant. It's our property. We would be liable. Let's face it, if that happens, Dr. Allen was in the weight room and if something came down on his chest and he got injured, we would still be, responsible.
They can't hurt me with that stuff.
They're gonna sue us anyway. So let's face it, the United States is kind of like, we can sue anybody we want to sue type of thing, right? So if the group uses the building and someone gets hurt, first and foremost, they have the insurance coverage we asked for, but they're still going to sue us anyway.
That's why I was saying the quality of the head of plant maintenance and the quality of our custodians is necessary to make this thing work. And I feel pretty good about them. The ones I know are all good quality, solid people.
And it's also the reason why we thought right up front, that contact person, that's why it's in bold, you need to tell me that you're responsible. And you have to take our safety class. We're going to point out to you what we believe you need to use as a user of our gym, where the elevator is, where all the doors are, where the light switches are, where the main switch panel is to shut everything off, all of those types of things. You're responsible. And we thought that we had too much of people coming in to use our building that had no idea to what to do if the fire alarm went off. And that's why that person has to take our little video thing and sign off that they did.
Okay?
That doesn't make.
Now,
it any
entity,
better.
Cheryl,
Okay.
like, I know, like, there's been basketball leagues come in, adults, and play for an hour, say on Sunday morning, or, I'm just asking.
I'm not touching it.
And I was just thinking, what if a town, and we've thought about it in New Braintree, what if we see if people want to, I don't know, play, like we're talking volleyball or something as a town thing? Are those things going to be eliminated? I wouldn't want to stir it up or, just something to do in town. We used to do it in our town hall until we knocked the ceiling tiles
Sounds like
down.
you need to have
That's why the trustee.
an organization with somebody in charge. And
But we wouldn't have insurance though.
Insurance.
That's just a group of people willing to take on the responsibility of the building, but I'm just looking at it from her insurance point of view.
This document would not allow that to happen. Like the
Okay.
gentleman who called and said to Kevin, hey, we got a group of guys who want to play basketball. We currently have that situation going on that the superintendent is going to have that conversation. But if the school committee, this is their policy. If they say, we don't, go ahead, we're going to let that happen. We want them to use the space in the building. I just want to tell you from an insurance perspective, that opens up to an awful lot of risk that we don't want.
Correct.
We already have all kinds of risks. If one of our employees gets injured on the job,
Sure.
if one of our kids get hurt here in the school, we want to take on the public as well.
No.
No, I know. We've just had entities in the past and I'm sure will be at you saying, well, why can't we? We've always done it, Just, I was curious. I didn't know if there's a waiver way of signing, then you get into other things, but
You take that waiver to court and guess who's going to win? The
Right.
person that got injured. We're still in court now for an accident for a student. It takes so much time and energy when these types of things happen. If we open it to the public too, that could be all we do is follow where our insurance company is in court today.
Any other questions, comments?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Or send it to committee, whatever.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
Now, we had talked about, what are these, motherhood and apple pie policies for next time?
They are financial policies, yes.
Motherhood.
Financial.
Financial
And
policies.
Cheryl will review them, so it won't be as gray.
I had asked that they be passed out ahead of the meeting. So why don't you just send them to everybody before the next meeting? If you would, we talked about tonight maybe, but they're not quite ready yet, so just sometime along the way.
I'll just say why they're not ready. In some areas, the MASC policies make me a little nervous. And that's why whenever one of those financial policies can have come out in the past, we reviewed it and made it a Quabbin policy rather than an MASC policy. And I'd like to, there are several, right? I'd like to do that and take the time to do that with these as well. Sometimes they leave us open for
I
misinterpretation.
much prefer that,
Okay, thank you.
particularly
I'll get it.
knowing the people in the administration here who are doing this, as opposed to whatever person MASC has doing it, who I don't know. Okay,
When is the next one?
Dr. Allen, what I did for this meeting was I put all the policies, et cetera, in the school committee drive so that everyone had access to them. So I'll just do that again with, I know you don't have access to the drive, but for everyone else.
I encountered them for the first time this evening here. That's okay. We had assiduous discussions
That's
on
what
these
Dr. Muir said. Yep.
last Thursday.
You hang on to this too, or do you want it to stay?
That was yours from last time when you weren't here.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we are adjourned. Thank you all. Having a little bit over an hour, but that's not too bad. I promised a quick meeting tonight. Thank you all for coming.
Next meeting will be November, I can't remember if it's the 5th or 6th.
I don't know, maybe actually.
The night before the election, which is the election.